Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum, Dubious speculation. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So it's been a little while since we did a video on ETH, but it seemed prudent to do one because it is December after all, and we have made a comparison to the 2016 cycle on more than one occasion. So let's check in and see where we in fact are. If you're new to the channel, one of the things that we have discussed quite frequently this year are the similarities between Ethereum in 2016 and Ethereum in 2024. And the similarities are not just on the USD valuations, which we could find plenty of similarities, they're also on the Bitcoin valuations. So if we start off with the USD valuations, one of the things you'll notice in 2016 is that there were three primary capitulations, right? There was one in April, there was one in August, and there was one in December. Okay, so if you guys were here back in 2016, I'm sure you will remember those times. They were somewhat scary, and it felt like Ethereum could just never break through. But you will, in fact, see that you had April, August, and December. All right, so because of that, we have speculated that maybe we will see the same thing this time as well. And if you go look at 2024, one of the things you'll notice is that we, in fact, had a capitulation in April and one in August. Okay? So when we look at this, what you'll notice, let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see it when we're sort of zoomed out here. But what you'll notice is that the pattern is repeating fairly closely, right? April, August, and December. And then in 2024, it's almost a carbon copy. There are some differences. We can talk about some of those differences as well. But you essentially have April, August, and obviously we weren't really sure if we were going to get one in December or not. It was playing out a little bit differently this time. So, it doesn't have to be the exact same thing. What I'm talking about is last cycle in November, ETH was going down, but this cycle, ETH went up in November. That doesn't mean you still can't get a December capitulation. It just means that it is somewhat different, right? Like it's not a carbon copy of 2016, but what we could say is that in 2016 there was a low in April, August, and December. And it certainly feels like we could see something very similar again, where you have these lows April, August, and December. Okay. So I wanted to remind people of that. It's easy to sort of lose focus on that. It's easy to forget about it when the market goes higher than you think, and then it can go lower than you think. But just know that this is very similar to what happened in 2016. And back then, what essentially happened is Ethereum went down and it bottomed out early December on a wick, but then it had weekly closes lower than that wick, even as late as the last week of January, the last week of December, going into the first week of January. And so what essentially happened is Ethereum did not pick back up until the post-halving year, right, until 2025. So I would argue you could see something similar like that happen once again, where you have, that April, August, and December capitulations. It makes everyone question everything as it relates to Ethereum. And then hopefully sometime in 2025, the market for Ethereum picks back up. There were some other comparisons we could make as well, not only as it relates to ETH USD, but also, of course, ETH Bitcoin. We have made plenty of comparisons between the 2016 cycle and the 2024 cycle with ETH USD. But what you'll notice is that the Bitcoin valuation also looks somewhat similar. It might not appear that way when you look at it like this, but what you could do is if you come over here and you take a bar pattern, and we're just going to sort of take it to here, This is the pattern that ETH Bitcoin had back in that cycle. Now, all we're going to do is we're going to expand it. We're going to expand it. And what you'll notice, is that it's almost the exact same thing, right? It's almost the exact same thing. And so what I'm suggesting, right? What I'm suggesting is that there is a decent chance that things are playing out exactly how they played out, more or less, for Ethereum on its Bitcoin pair. What happened back then, for those that are curious, for those that actually value their portfolio in sats and they don't just say they do, ETH Bitcoin bottomed out the last week of December going into the first week of January. If we isolate the day that ETH Bitcoin bottomed in 2016 in December, just so we have an idea, the day that it bottomed, December 28th. So a little over a week from now. And even though it had bottomed then, what you'll notice is that it did get a little bit of a move up in late December, but the larger move up didn't occur until January 3rd. All right, January 3rd. There was also a low put in by ETH Bitcoin earlier, and then it swept that low. So I've talked a little bit before about how it's possible the low for ETH Bitcoin is in. If it's not in, I think it would only sweep the prior low. Okay, or maybe it goes to like 0.03 or something. I mean, it already went to like 0.031, 0.032. So something like that could theoretically happen. Note, there's also a similarity between Ethereum last cycle, okay? Because if you look at the bull market support band, what you'll notice is that after ETH Bitcoin got a bounce, after sort of the main capitulation, right? After it finally got a bounce, it was rejected from the bull market support band, and then it came back down, more or less gave us a double bottom, right? More or less gave us a double bottom, and then started to go up. So there's always a chance that you see something like that as well, where it just forms some type of double bottom before going up in 2025. So I would argue there still do continue to be a lot of similarities between this cycle here and that cycle. If you prefer to compare to this cycle where it also broke down, ETH USD did get a correction as ETH Bitcoin was getting rejected right here. And then once ETH Bitcoin got through the bull market support band, the bull market for ETH Bitcoin finally began. But it took a while to set it up. And I would argue that it seems like we could be setting up something similar going into 2025. Now, I want to go back to ETH USD because, predicting USD valuations of cryptocurrencies is essentially impossible, right? I mean, I can't do it, in any real accurate and sustained way. I mean, it's nearly impossible. And the reason is because, the markets can be very irrational for really long periods of time, both to the upside and the downside. That's why we get these boom and bust cycles. That's why I sort of, defer to Bitcoin valuations of cryptocurrencies. Those are a little bit more predictable, right? During quantitative tightening and high rates, most cryptocurrencies bleed to Bitcoin. During lower rates in QE, altcoins tend to outperform Bitcoin. Okay, so we're still in QT right now. Right, we're still in QT, quantitative tightening. Now, I don't know, unfortunately, exactly how low ETH will go here. You could argue, right? You could make the argument that maybe it'll just bottom out at the bull market support band, right? Around, 2,800 all the way up to like 3,125. So let's just say 2,800 to 3,100. You could make the argument that it'll just find support here going into the end of the year and then get a move up in 2025. Perfectly valid outcome, right? Perfectly valid outcome. And certainly it is a possibility that should be considered. In fact, if by the end of the year ETH USD is still holding the bull market support band, there's a good chance it'll continue to hold it. Okay. You can also see that there was a time over here in late 2017 where ETH USD, had some trouble breaking through a level. And then, it did eventually hold the bull market support band. After holding it, it was then able to move back up and take it out. So you do need to be aware that that is an outcome where you get a December capitulation, but it's not, it's not as bad as people think it could be, right? Where maybe you get a wick below it, right? A wick below the bull market support band, but it doesn't really go below it. And it could look something like this, right? Where it just kind of bottoms out right there, maybe around 2,500, right? You see a wick to 2,500, just like you saw in April of 2024. If you look in 2016, what you'll notice is that the wick in April, ETH USD swept that low in December, right? So there was a wick in April, and then ETH USD swept that low about 7-8 months later. Okay, so it did take out the April low. Now, in this case, the April low was around 2537. So I would keep that in mind. Like if Ethereum goes to 2537 and it looks like you're on a wick here and it starts to go back up to the bull market support band, that could be sort of the final capitulation opportunity. It's possible. If that is not the case, right? If it doesn't hold at 2,500, if there's a larger drawdown for whatever reason, and I don't know what that reason would be, there's all sorts of different things we could think of, but if Bitcoin were to get, say, like a larger correction, and I don't know, how low it would go, I think you could argue that it'll try to potentially hold support, here or even here. Okay, you could argue that Bitcoin wants to try to hold support there. If not, if you go to the bull market support band, that's going to take you even lower. Worst case scenario, I would imagine for this year, would be sort of like back testing that, this lower high structure, right? Where you finally get the breakout and then you get some massive retest and then you move higher. Okay, that could happen as well. So if Bitcoin just kind of comes back down to like 90K or even 85K, then Ethereum could bottom out around 2,500. Just sort of thinking like what is possible. It could bottom out now, by the way. I mean, the low could already be in, but I'm just saying like if it continues, it depends on how far down Bitcoin goes, right? If Bitcoin bottoms at 90, then or 8,500 or 85,000, then Ethereum might just simply bottom out somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000. If it comes all the way back down here, where it sort of gets that major move back and retests this breakout, then obviously ETH could go lower. And I want to at least prepare people for that outcome. It doesn't have to happen, but one of the things you could look at back in 2016 is that you can actually connect the April low to the August low, right? And note that if you connect the April low to the August low, the December low basically just swept that support line, right? It swept that support line. You had a low, a lower low, and then this one broke that support line, made it probably feel like Ethereum was just going to come crumbling down, and then it got a nice bounce, and then the rest is history. If you look at the same thing today, the August low was actually quite a bit lower than the April low, right? Instead of sort of a flat line like this, you end up getting something that looks like that. Okay. Now, I don't know if it's going to go that low. I don't. I wish I knew. I wish I could tell you with strong conviction that it's going to bottom out at a very specific level. The reality is that wherever it does bottom out, my guess is that it will just be a wick. Okay? That's my guess. Kind of like the April wick and the August wick. So wherever the actual low is, it's probably not going to be there very long, and it's probably going to happen relatively soon. Okay, so what I would say is that, I mean, in this case, you had sort of let me get the price label here. You had a low at 2,500 and then a low at 1,900. If it has to go below this low and it comes back down here, obviously that would be quite a bit lower. And I don't want people to think that it has to go that low, right? I mean, I've said that it's a possibility. It doesn't actually have to play out. And again, with ETH Bitcoin, between 0.03 to 0.04, I think that's the more important thing to look at, right? The Bitcoin valuation of Ethereum, not its USD valuation. Do note that if it does go this low, it would at least finalize the final piece of the puzzle that I've been tracking, and that would be Ethereum finally making the move to its lower logarithmic regression trend line, right? So, will it happen? I don't know. It did happen in 2016. It could happen in 2024, but you also could easily just have, a move back to here, right, where it looks like it's going to happen for the thousandth time, and then it ends up just being just outside the lower logarithmic regression trend line. So be aware that there's always a chance that it plays out like that too. I don't want people to just kind of like sit on their hands assuming that it has to play out in a certain way like this. This is probably going to be the most bearish outcome, and not an outcome that has to occur, right? This is just the most bearish outcome that I would think of, would basically just being putting in a low, a lower low, April, August, December, just like 2016, April, August, December, and just saying that the last low could sweep the support line from the first two lows. Over here, it meant going just below it to the lower logarithmic regression trend line. Worst case scenario, it could go down over here to the lower logarithmic regression trend line. But again, it's just an outcome to be aware of. I would argue that whatever's going to happen is probably going to happen within the next couple of weeks or so. That's my best guess, right? I mean, it could be a little longer than that, but a lot of the times when Ethereum has seen these drops, these aggressive drops, they actually happen relatively quickly. You just get a couple of weeks where I mean, this is 3 weeks in a row where Ethereum just fell off a cliff. So some of the times you'll get these moves, right? I mean, this right here, that was a 47% drop in 3 weeks, right? Here you had a 40 or 38% drop in about 5 weeks. Already, this is a 24% drop just in like a week. Okay, so when Ethereum does get these capitulations, it can move relatively quickly. It makes you feel like it's never going to recover. My guess is that it does find some type of low on its USD pair and its Bitcoin pair, probably December, January at the latest, and then it starts to pick back up again. That is my best guess. And if you go look at the website here, and we go look at say, Ethereum in monthly returns, what you'll notice is that ETH in 2024 has actually been really similar to 2016, almost to the T, but not exactly. If you look at 2024, January, February, and March were green. 2016, January, February, and March were green. April was red for both of those months. May was green, or sorry, April was red for both of those years. May was green for both of those years. And then June, July, and August were red. June, July, and August was red here. September green, October red, October red. Here's the difference. November 2016, ETH was red. November 2024, ETH was green. So this comparison kind of became no longer valid when it deviated in November. So, but you can see that, I mean, if Ethereum closes red in December, it will legitimately be a carbon copy of 2016 in terms of monthly returns, whether it was green or red, except for 1 month, right? Every month that was green in 2024 was green in 2016. Every red month in 2024 was red in 2016, with the exception that November was green. And in 2016, it was red. So that is kind of the main difference, but you can see there are certainly a lot of similarities. You could also look at quarterly returns for Ethereum at 2016 and see that it does deviate somewhat. But in 2016, Q1 was green, Q2 was red in 2024, where it was green in 2016. Q3 was red for both. Q4 was red over here. Will it be red in 2024? This has certainly been an interesting asset to follow over the years. I do think that with ETH Bitcoin kind of having gone where it is, the low for ETH Bitcoin is either in or it will be in relatively soon. And then as far as ETH USD, it's possible that you get this one final capitulation, but after that, I do think the market, I do think Ethereum would get a strong bounce whenever that final capitulation low is in. Probably is going to happen, soon, or could still be a couple of weeks away, but it is something that we saw in 2016, and you should at least be prepared for it. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.